Alright guys, welcome to Real Classic Film Reviews and welcome to the 10 horror movies you must watch episode. This video isn't designed for me to tell you what the greatest horror movies of all time are, but to give you a little starter kit of sorts to then go out and expand your viewing and form your own opinions, etc. The way we structure it here is to suggest films from a variety of angles within the genre. So you won't find 10 slasher movies, for instance. That's a list of its own. But like I said, each one of these films is a great starting point for further horror movie exploration. So allow me to offer you 10 horror movies you must see. Now let's get maybe the most obvious entry on this list out of the way first. In 1960, Alfred Hitchcock took a small budget and his TV show film crew and made one of the most influential horror movies in cinema history. A girl on the run from a crime stops off at a lonely motel and makes the mistake of taking a shower. Shocking in its time, Psycho these days works a lot better as a crime thriller than an out-and-out horror movie, but it's immaculately made, and slivers of its influence can be found in pretty much everything made since. See it for an Anthony Perkins performance that effortlessly moves from shy and retiring to out-and-out mania. Essential stuff.
She just goes a little mad sometimes. We all go a little mad sometimes. Haven't you?
Now, the 1980 film Dressed to Kill is pretty much Brian De Palma's homage to Psycho. Its representations of transgender people would never wash in today's overly sensitive climate, but it's great fun. Also, brace yourself and check out 1986's Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. A powerhouse Michael Rooker in his debut movie, no less, goes on a rampant killing spree. Not for the faint of heart by a long stretch. Now, in 1978, John Carpenter was instrumental in the formation of what would become an entire genre unto itself. Any film where you take a bunch of teenagers and have them succumb to grisly deaths by a mass killer grew from the seeds that Carpenter planted here. Halloween not only cemented Carpenter's title as one of the masters of horror, but also launched the career of one Jamie Lee Curtis. Now, it's a slow build kind of a movie, after the nightmarish opening sequence, of course, that takes its time giving us fleeting glimpses of the killer before a full-on murder fest explodes on Halloween night. Now, of course, sequels galore would follow, but see this to witness the birth of a formula the movies would cash in on for decades. Also consider checking out 1980's Friday the 13th, which took the baton from Halloween and dialed up the body count, gore and comedy. Also, 1971's Fright features Susan George's lone babysitter coming under siege from a lunatic who's just escaped from an asylum. Sounds familiar? Now, the classics continue with the next entry, and that is 1973's demonic horror magnum opus, The Exorcist, a movie infamous for being banned and having audience members passing out and vomiting in the aisles. Yeah, we've been subjected to far worse in the past 50 years, but this still remains an essential chiller. The story of a young girl whose exploits with a Ouija board bring about a shocking invasion of her body. Max von Sydow's titular exorcist, along with Jason Miller's younger priest, arrive on the scene to do battle with evil. Now, the sheer amount of subsequent movies that try and shoehorn the word exorcist or exorcism into their titles is testament to the success of this film. See it for the perfect demonic fusion of Linda Blair's performance, Dick Smith and Robert Layden's makeup effects, and Mercedes McCambridge's spine-chilling vocals.
Do it again.
In time.
No, now.
In time.
Also, consider checking out 1968's Rosemary's Baby, which offers another study of the effects of demonic forces on a family unit, replacing the horrendous imagery with isolation and worries of pregnancy complications. And also 1979's Amityville Horror offers up further nasty household spirits as a family move into a lovely new house that just happens to have been the scene of a mass shooting. Now, you can't mention horror and not include some of the excellent Japanese entries in the genre, and may I suggest you begin with 1998's The Ring. This film single-handedly sparked the Japanese horror boom of the 2000s and is the story of a spooky videotape that, after watching will curse its viewer and kill them after 7 days. Now, Ring will not only twist your nerves with its unique 7-day countdown to terror, but it also features some of the most disturbing imagery in the genre, something that J-horror seems to have mastered, with pretty much every Japanese ghost movie released in the Ring's wake attempting to imitate Hideo Nakata's 1998 film. Quite a few coming close. Now consider also checking out 2002's Dark Water, which sees Hideo Nakata again, masterfully balancing drama and horror. Bath time won't ever be the same again. And 2001's Pulse from Kiyoshi Kurosawa sees the dead using the internet to haunt the living. Despite the more techie aspect, this is 2 hours of absolute dread. Now schlocky, goopy horror is next up on the menu, and I think for sheer balls to the wall outrageousness we'll go for Sam Raimi's Evil Dead 2. What about the first movie? Well, this is really a remake of that film with added blood, guts and zaniness. Bruce Campbell cemented himself as cult hero Ash Williams. Now, stop me if you've heard this one, but a bunch of people go to a cabin in the woods, open the Book of the Dead and unleash a bunch of demons. Essentially a remake of Night of the Living Dead fused with Rio Bravo and injected with some of the most outrageous violence ever seen. And then lightly sprinkle that with comedy. It's as funny as it is horrifying. And see it for Ash's first utterance of his signature comment.
Groovy.
Also, if you enjoyed demonic summoning and outrageous gore, consider checking out 1987's Hellraiser, where the prize for solving ancient puzzles is having your soul and most of your body torn apart. And although it features a strong sci-fi element, 1982's gloop horror fest The Thing, again from John Carpenter, is basically one of the best body horror movies ever made. Now, from all that gore to some of that haunted house, cerebral horror that crawls under your skin and threatens to chase you through a frozen maze, 1980's The Shining from Stanley Kubrick can be read as a haunted house movie, a psychological study of isolation, a look at telekinetic powers, a family drama, or all of the above, and much, much more. Its imagery has passed into legend. Its intricacies are the subject of documentaries and books. Kubrick took Stephen King's 1977 novel and completely reimagined it, much to King's dismay. But what he made is a true masterpiece of sustained dread. See it to find out what really lurks in room 237. Now also consider checking out 1963's The Haunting, itself an adaptation of the 1959 novel The Haunting of Hill House, which pretty much wrote the rulebook for every haunted house movie or TV show in the past 60 years. And 1980's The Changeling sees George C. Scott dragged into an old mystery as an otherworldly presence in an old mansion's attic holds the key to an unspeakable murder. This one is truly chilling. Now, you can't explore the horror genre without travelling way back. No, not to the beginning of cinema, but to the early 30s when Universal Studios began adapting gothic classics such as 1931's Dracula, starring Bela Lugosi as the titular count. This wasn't the first appearance of vampires in film. A couple of lost Russian and Hungarian films from 1920 and 1921 claim that title, but it's the one that cemented the popular image of Dracula and vampirism that continues over 9 decades later. Now, Todd Browning directs here, adapting Bram Stoker's 1897 novel, and sets in motion an avalanche of monster movie cinema. Now, see it for the birth of Bela Lugosi's typecasting as the Transylvanian Count, something he would never escape, unfortunately. He was even buried wearing one of his Dracula capes and full costume. Now, essential viewing is the earliest surviving vampire movie, and that's F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu, a symphony of horror from 1922. Max Schreck here playing Count Orlok, and this is a masterwork of black and white silent terror. Now, any horror list must mention Hammer Horror at least once, so their 1958 version of Dracula starring Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing is essential viewing in your vampire movie journey. Here we get fangs, wooden stakes, and vampires being sex symbols for the first time. Now, I feel like all the films in this little list are hugely influential in their own way, but strictly from a pop culture standpoint, 1968's Night of the Living Dead may be the most influential of the lot. George Romero threw a small group of survivors into an old farmhouse to protect themselves from the horde of flesh-eating zombies that are suddenly stalking the countryside, and so was born an entire genre unto itself that has, in the 50-odd years since, seen countless entries in the form of sequels, spin-offs, TV shows, books, comics, you name it. But here in stark, low-budget black and white, and with one of the first black actors to be a lead in a horror movie, Romero shocked and disgusted critics and audiences with his use of gore and shivery terror. See it for one of the most nerve-rattling trips down into a cellar in film history. Now, between zombie entries, Romero made The Crazies in 1973. Here, the military attempts to contain a man-made combat virus that causes blood-fueled permanent insanity in those infected as it overtakes a small Pennsylvanian town. And the next logical step from Night of the Living Dead is Romero's equally seminal Dawn of the Dead. He made a decade later in 1978, swapping Cold War and Vietnam allegory for the mindless consumerism that was still only bubbling away but would explode in the 80s. Now, for the penultimate entry, classic European horror gets a shout out, and a great place to start is Georges Franju's 1960 medical body horror drama, Eyes Without a Face, the story of a plastic surgeon who's striving to perform a face transplant on his daughter who was disfigured in a car accident. More thriller really than out-and-out gorefest. It's a quite sad and haunting film that folds in elements of guilt, obsession and Frankenstein-like medical tinkering during its still shocking surgical procedure scenes that themselves would echo across cinema, especially in the movies of directors such as David Cronenberg. So see it for the birth, really, of body horror. Now, Euro horror cannot be discussed without mentioning Italian giallos at some stage, so start that journey off with the debut feature from the great Dario Argento and 1970's The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, still one of the great police procedural serial killer movies out there. Now, for more black and white chills and an uncomfortable and controversial subject matter, Fritz Lang's 1931 movie M features the residents of Berlin bringing vigilante justice to a creepy child murderer when German police are unable to apprehend him. Now, in 1974, Tobe Hooper wrote, produced, directed, and I think did the music for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a poster child for the video nasties era. Now, despite its actual lack of gruesome violence in comparison to some other movies, and certainly the movies of today, its skills lie in its disturbing tone and overall feeling of hopelessness, much of which is attributed to the low-budget look and feel of the movie. Now, again, its imitators are too numerous to mention, but the sheer volume of horror movies that made sure either the words chainsaw or massacre appeared in their titles is testament to its power. Taking about 25 years to get an uncut release here in the UK, modern audiences will find its shocks probably quite tame, but its grubby sense of dread is undeniable. Also consider checking out Wes Craven's 1977 The Hills Have Eyes, which makes a perfect double feature with Hooper's film. It's a spine-tingling tale of suburban family under siege from a family of cannibal savages after becoming stranded in the Nevada desert. Also, if you dare, delve deeper into the video nasties vault with 1979's Driller Killer, Abel Ferreira's Urban Nightmare, which basically does exactly what it says on the tin, and its censor-baiting promotional artwork. Guys, thanks so much for watching this horror movie starter kit list. What would your choices be? Which 10 would you choose? Obviously, trying to choose 10 entries in a genre as huge and diverse as horror is pretty crazy. But maybe I've reminded you of a couple of films and hopefully mentioned something that you've yet to see. So, happy viewing. Bye for now.